The page was torn at a diagonal, as if someone had grabbed it in a hurry and pulled. It was found wedged beneath a loose floorboard in an abandoned ranger outpost at 8,400 feet elevation in the Bridger-Teton National Forest, discovered not by investigators, but by a 14-year-old boy on a school hiking trip who thought he'd found something interesting to show his teacher. The handwriting on it was a woman's, looping, careful, the kind that takes time. 3 lines were legible. The 4th had been torn away. On August 29, 2019, when that page was matched to a diary reported missing 27 years earlier, a case that the state of Wyoming had quietly stopped pursuing in 1998, broke open in a way that no one in Teton County had anticipated, and the name it led to had been sitting in a county property record the entire time. But before we get to any of that, we have to go back to the summer of 1992. Because to understand what that page meant, you first have to understand who Loretta Vane was and why she had gone up that mountain alone. Sublette County, Wyoming, in the summer of 1992, was the kind of place that made people feel small in the best possible way. The mountains ran in every direction. The sky above them was a particular shade of blue that residents would struggle to describe to anyone who hadn't seen it. And the towns tucked into the valleys below existed on a scale that made everyone in them feel known and accountable and, most of the time, safe. Pennydale, the county seat, had a population of just over 1,300. It had 1 traffic light, a hardware store that had been in the same family since 1947, a diner where the coffee was bad and the pie was extraordinary, and a bulletin board outside the post office where people still posted handwritten notices looking for work or offering hay. Pagers were starting to appear on the belts of the men who worked for the county. A few households had answering machines. Cable television had arrived that spring and was still a novelty most families gathered around as if it were an event. The world outside Wyoming felt very far away, and nobody in Pennydale was particularly sorry about that. Loretta Vane was 31 years old that summer. She had grown up in Pennydale, the only daughter of a ranching family whose name appeared on a county road sign 2 miles south of town, and she had left for college in Laramie at 18 and come back at 24 because, she told her mother, she'd gotten as far away as she'd needed to, and found out the distance hadn't changed anything she'd wanted changed. She worked as a nurse at Sublette County Rural Health Care, the small clinic that served the entire valley, and was known for a particular quality of calm that patients described as the kind of stillness you find in someone who has already decided that panic is never useful. She had a son, 8-year-old Cody, who rode his bicycle the 3 blocks between school and his grandmother's house every afternoon, and who had her same dark eyes and her same refusal to be hurried. She kept a diary, had since she was 12, a green hardcover notebook she bought from the same stationery shop in Jackson Hole every time one filled up. She hiked alone every August. It was the one thing she did that belonged entirely to herself. 3 or 4 days in the Bridger-Teton backcountry, a route she had walked enough times that the Forest Service rangers at the Granite Creek trailhead knew her by name and waved her through without asking for her permit. She told her mother, the August she left for what would be the last time, that she'd be back by the 18th. She kissed Cody goodbye on the morning of August 11, 1992, handed him a drawing she'd made of a red-tailed hawk, and drove her pickup toward the mountains in the early light. She never came down. The search began on August 19, 1992, one day after Loretta failed to return to Pennydale as promised. Her mother, Dolores Vane, called the Sublette County Sheriff's Office at 7:03 a.m. Deputies arrived at the Granite Creek trailhead by 9:15 a.m. and found Loretta's pickup truck exactly where she always parked it, a red Dodge Ram with a cracked side mirror that Loretta had been meaning to fix since April. The truck was locked. Her wallet was in the glove box. Search and rescue deployed 22 volunteers across 3 trail corridors by noon. By August 20th, the search had expanded to cover 14 square miles of backcountry terrain. At 4:30 p.m. on August 22nd, a search team found Loretta's campsite at a site called Elkhorn Flat, elevation 8,100 feet, a location she had used before, and logged in her permit application. The tent was standing. Her sleeping bag was inside. Her cook kit was clean and stacked. Her pack was there, her boots were there. Her diary was not. She was not there. 3 days of intensive search found no further trace. No footprints leading away from camp. No disturbance to the surrounding terrain that anyone could read as meaningful. Nothing. The diary's absence was noted in the case file by Sublette County Sheriff's Deputy Carl Emmerich. He wrote a single line about it. Green notebook, personal journal, not present at campsite. Unknown if carried on person at time of incident. He did not know, and could not have known, that that notebook was the only thing Loretta had taken with her when she left that camp, and that someone else had known she was there. The investigation was assigned to Detective Alan Pruitt of the Sublette County Sheriff's Office, a 44-year-old Wyoming native who had worked backcountry disappearances before, and who approached the Vane case with the methodical seriousness it deserved. He had grown up hunting these mountains with his father and understood their terrain well enough to know that people who knew what they were doing, and Loretta Vane knew what she was doing, did not simply vanish from an established campsite without cause. Pruitt's initial focus was on Loretta's life in Pinedale. Records show the department interviewed 41 individuals in the first 3 weeks. Co-workers, neighbors, patients she had treated, people who used the same trailhead. What emerged was a woman with no known conflicts, no debt, no estrangements. Her ex-husband, Cody's father, a man named Dennis Frey, had been in Casper at a construction job since mid-July, which 4 co-workers confirmed in detail. He was eliminated within the first week. The second line of inquiry concerned a man named Warren Galt, 48, who ran a wilderness guide operation out of Moran Junction and who had reportedly been seen at the Granite Creek trailhead the same week Loretta departed. Galt was interviewed twice. He acknowledged being in the area but had 3 clients on a documented guided trip during the relevant dates, all of whom confirmed his presence with them continuously. The alibi held. Galt was eliminated. Meanwhile, Dolores Vane drove to the trailhead every morning for 2 weeks and sat in her car and watched the tree line. She had brought Cody's drawings with her, the ones he'd made for his mother at school. She taped them to the inside of the windshield. 8 years old, sitting next to his grandmother, watching the same mountains his mother had walked into. He brought his bicycle even though there was nowhere to ride it. He brought it because it made him feel like he hadn't fully stopped moving toward her yet. By October 1992, Pruitt had run every available lead to its end. The case was reclassified as a missing persons investigation. No body had been found, no crime scene, no evidence of foul play that could be documented. The official conclusion, noted reluctantly, as Pruitt's case notes made clear, was that Loretta Vane had experienced a wilderness accident in terrain too vast to search completely. Her remains, if they existed, might never be recovered. Dolores Vane did not accept this conclusion. She said so to Pruitt's face, in his office, on a Tuesday in November, while Cody waited in the hallway. Pruitt had no answer for her that she hadn't already heard. He told her he was sorry. He meant it. The years above 8,000 feet in Wyoming do not move the way they do in towns. They move the way glaciers move, slowly, with weight, erasing things that seemed permanent and revealing things that seemed buried forever. By 1995, 3 years had passed. Cody Vane was 11, living with his grandmother full-time in the same house Loretta had grown up in, sleeping in his mother's old bedroom under a quilt Dolores had made for her 30th birthday. He had asked Detective Pruitt, when he was 9, whether the police were still looking for his mother. Pruitt had said yes. By 1995, he had to say something more careful. The reward poster that Dolores had put up in the post office, the diner, and the hardware store had been replaced twice. She reprinted them herself on the same printer at the county library, every time the old ones faded. The hardware store owner, a man named Bud Callister, who had known Loretta since she was a girl, kept one in his window until the day he retired in 2002, and then handed it, carefully, to the man who bought the store and asked him to keep it up. He did. Detective Pruitt retired from the Sublette County Sheriff's Office in 1999. He boxed his case files, including the full Vane file, and took them home. He kept them in his study. Not the garage, not the basement. His study, where he could see them. He had never stopped believing there was something he'd missed. He just hadn't found it yet. By 2004, 12 years had passed. Cody Vane was 20 years old, studying nursing at the University of Wyoming in Laramie, following his mother into the work she had loved, in the way that children who have lost a parent sometimes do, reaching backward toward the shape of them through the choices that feel most like contact. Dolores was 71, and still going up to the trailhead on August 11th every year, the anniversary of the last morning, leaving flowers at the base of the trail sign. The case had been cold for over a decade. The state of Wyoming listed Loretta Vane as a presumed death in 2003. Dolores refused to sign any documentation that used that language. As far as she was concerned, Loretta was missing, not presumed, not declared, missing, and owed an answer. Every case on this channel represents weeks of research, verifying facts, and piecing together lives that deserved better. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind stories like this one, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your support is what makes this possible. Now, let's get back to Loretta. Then, in the summer of 2019, a 14-year-old boy named Tyler Marsh, on a school hiking program out of Jackson, found something under a floorboard in an abandoned ranger outpost that had been closed since 1997. Tyler Marsh had wandered maybe 40 feet off the marked trail when he noticed the outpost, a small, weather-beaten structure half concealed by lodgepole pines, its door long since fallen inward, its single window clouded with grime. He went inside the way 14-year-old boys go into abandoned buildings, quickly, without thinking too carefully about it. The floorboards were rotted in several places. One had shifted. Beneath it, protected in a gap between the subfloor and the earth by what amounted to a fluke of dry mountain air and the outpost's eastern-facing exposure, was a folded piece of paper. 3 lines of handwriting. A torn edge at the bottom where a fourth had been. The paper was brittle, yellowed at the edges, but legible. His teacher photographed it on her phone. She reported it to the Forest Service ranger station at the trailhead that afternoon, more out of procedural caution than any real expectation. The ranger on duty, a woman named Dana Roarke, looked at the photograph and felt something she could not immediately name. She had read about the Loretta Vane case in a local history piece published by the Pinedale Roundup 3 years earlier, on the 25th anniversary of the disappearance. The handwriting in the photograph, the green paper, the kind used in certain hardcover journals, sold in stationery shops. She pulled the anniversary article on her phone. She compared. She called the Sublette County Sheriff's Office. The paper was sent to the Wyoming State Crime Laboratory in Cheyenne, where forensic document examiners confirmed within 6 weeks that the handwriting was consistent with samples from Loretta Vane's known records. A patient intake form she had completed at the clinic in 1991, preserved in medical archives. The match was not definitive, as the examiner's report made clear, but it was highly probable. The process of comparing handwriting characteristics, pen pressure, letter formation, consistent quirks in how a person renders certain letters, is painstaking work. And the examiner noted 2 specific formations in the letters E and T that appeared across both documents, in a pattern distinctive enough to distinguish from coincidence. The 3 legible lines said, "Arrived late. Wind from north. Shelf cloud over Elkhorn. Something is wrong with thee." The 4th line was gone. Cody Vane was 35 years old when he received the call from the Sublette County Sheriff's Office in September 2019. He was a registered nurse at St. John's Medical Center in Jackson. He sat in his car in the hospital parking lot for a long time after he hung up. Then he called his grandmother. Dolores, 86 years old, heard what he told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I knew the mountain had kept something." The discovery of the diary page reopened the investigation formally under the direction of Sublette County Sheriff's Detective Rebecca Morrow, 38 years old, who had grown up in Pendale and who had been assigned the Vane cold case file the previous year as part of a statewide cold case review. What the page changed was not the crime scene. There was still no body, no confirmed crime scene, but the implication of its location. The ranger outpost sat at 8,400 feet, 300 feet above Loretta's campsite, and approximately 4 miles northeast of Elkhorn Flat. It was off-trail, not dramatically so, but enough that a casual hiker would not have passed through it. Someone had been in that outpost. Someone had handled that page, torn it from the diary, and hidden it under a floorboard. The question was when and who had access. Morrow pulled the property and access records for the outpost, which had been a seasonal ranger station operated by a private contractor under a Forest Service permit from 1984 to 1997. The contractor was a man named Paul Gideon Streck, 64, who had operated backcountry guide and supply services out of a property in Bondurant, Wyoming since the late 1970s. He still lived there. Streck's name had never appeared in Pruitt's original investigation. He had not been at the Granite Creek trailhead that week. He used a different access point, one that Pruitt's canvas had not covered because it was in an adjacent district. He had a permit to operate in the Bridger-Teton backcountry for the duration of each summer season. He would have known that the outpost, technically off the main trail grid, was unlikely to be searched. His name appeared in a single document in the original case file, a Forest Service access log from the week of August 11th, 1992, listing permit holders active in the relevant zone. But the log had been reviewed only for the names of people interviewed, not for names of people who had not yet been identified as relevant. A DNA buccal swab was collected from Paul Gideon Streck on October 11, 2019, pursuant to a warrant obtained on the basis of the document analysis and the access records. The sample was cross-referenced against a partial DNA profile extracted from the diary page itself. Skin cells preserved in the paper fibers by the same dry conditions that had kept the handwriting legible. The Wyoming State Crime Laboratory returned results on November 4, 2019. The partial profile matched Paul Gideon Streck, with a statistical probability that the laboratory report described as scientifically conclusive. He answered the door himself when Detective Morrow and 2 Sublette County deputies arrived at his property in Bondurant on a cold morning in November, the mountains behind his house already carrying their first deep snow of the season. He looked at the warrant. He looked at Morrow. He said nothing for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, "I found her diary on the trail." He said nothing else. He was arrested on a charge of first-degree murder. He was 64 years old. In Pinedale, at Carter's Hardware, still in business, still under the name of the family that had run it since 1947. Now in its third generation, the woman who managed the store found the faded Loretta Vane poster she had inherited from the previous owner still tucked in the window behind a display of work gloves. She took it down carefully. She called Dolores Vane. She didn't know what to say. Neither did Dolores for a moment. Then Dolores told her, "Thank you for keeping it up." That was enough. The case against Paul Gideon Streck proceeded through the Wyoming court system over the following 2 years. In the absence of remains, Loretta Vane's body was never found, despite a renewed search of the terrain around the outpost. In the spring of 2020, the prosecution built its case on the DNA evidence, the access records, and a series of phone records from 1992 that placed Streck's business line in contact with the Granite Creek Ranger Station twice in the week before Loretta's departure, querying the names of permitted solo hikers for that week. He had asked for names. He had been given one. Paul Gideon Streck pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in March 2022 in a negotiated agreement that spared the Vane family a trial. He was sentenced to life in prison. He made no statement to the court. Loretta Vane was 31 years old on the morning of August 11, 1992, when she handed her son a drawing of a red-tailed hawk and drove toward the mountains she had loved her whole life. She was a nurse who brought stillness into rooms that needed it. She was a woman who bought the same green notebook from the same shop in Jackson Hole because she liked the continuity of it. The sense that her life, written out in her looping, careful hand, was a single long story worth keeping. She had raised a son who grew up to do the same work she had done. She had a mother who kept her face in a window for 27 years without deciding that love had an expiration date. Cody Vane was present at Paul Gideon Streck's sentencing. He read a statement. He said that his mother had taken him to a river once when he was 6 and shown him how a hawk hunts, the long, still circle in the air, the patience of it, the way it waits until the moment is exactly right. He said she had told him, "Most things worth finding require that kind of patience." He had not fully understood what she meant until now. He was 37 years old. He had waited 29 years for a name. Dolores Vane, 88 years old at the time of sentencing, did not attend the hearing. She watched it on a live stream on a tablet that Cody had set up for her in the kitchen of the house in Pinedale. When it ended, she went out to the front porch and sat in the same chair she had sat in every morning for 3 decades. The mountains were visible from that porch on a clear day. She sat there for a long time. The Loretta Vane case has since been cited by the Wyoming Department of Criminal Investigation as a model for the value of cold case no cross referencing with access and permit records. A combination that had never been applied to the case in 1992 because neither database existed in a searchable form at that time. The ranger outpost where the diary page was found was formally documented and sealed as a preserved evidence site in 2020. The diary itself was never found. Somewhere in those mountains, in terrain that even now resists full search, it may still be there. 33 years of careful looping handwriting in a green hardcover notebook from a shop in Jackson Hole, waiting for someone with the right kind of patience. What do you think it says about this case that a 14-year-old boy found what 27 years of investigation had not? What does it mean that Loretta Vane's killer identified her by name from a permit record? That she was, in a way, made vulnerable by the systems that were supposed to protect people in the backcountry? And do you believe Dolores Vane was right? That the mountain had always kept something and was always going to give it back? Leave your thoughts below. These conversations are what make this work matter. Justice found Loretta Vane after 27 years. Stories like hers are why this channel exists. If you believe truth is worth pursuing, no matter how long it takes, subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More are waiting in the description below. Thank you for being here.